Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this episode of J3 Dialogues. We will just give attendees another 30 seconds. I know multiple people are in the waiting room and our team is letting them in, and then we'll start. Swati, should we start? Okay, great. All right, so we'll get started. Thank you, everyone, for making the time to join this webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about designing AI ready K-12 classrooms. And while the focus of this conversation is K-12, many themes and many questions that will come up are transferable to higher education as well. I think everyone in the audience today will agree that AI has become ubiquitous technology. We may have been surprised by how quickly it became ubiquitous. We may be concerned about how rapidly this technology is changing, but it's almost a given that AI is here to stay and stay for a long time. And if AI is here to stay, ah, okay, there is an echo. I will, Professor Raman, maybe request you to mute. And Pankaj, thank you so much for flagging that. If you still hear the echo, please let us know. So, as I was saying, if AI is here to stay, it only makes sense for educators and educational administrators to seriously reckon with the diffusion of this new technology. Now, the landscape for this conversation is really broad, so I will quickly walk the audience through what what we'll talk about and how we'll approach it. We'll obviously approach it from the lens of various stakeholders, students being central to this, but also teachers, parents, school leaders, administrators. We will talk about different policy approaches towards AI adoption in education. We'll talk about the changing realities inside classrooms, implementation risks, and other opportunities that educational institutions need to watch out for as we go along. With that, I'd like to welcome my guests for the evening, Professor Karthik Raman and Meenal Majumdar. Um, I have another message, but can I have anybody else except Pankaj just confirm if the echo is for everyone? Swati, if you can tell me if that's the case for everyone, because I think no echo. Okay, okay, all is good. So I think Pankaj, you'll need to check your device. Okay, great. I'll just quickly introduce both our panelists. I'll go with Professor Karthik Raman first. Professor Raman is the professor at the Vadvani School of Data Science and AI at IIT Madras. He also served as the chair for the CBSE expert committee that has recently launched the artificial intelligence and computational thinking curriculum for grades 3 to 8. This CBSE being one of the largest boards in the company in the country is going to be the work of this committee is going to be very widespread. He holds a doctorate from IISc Bangalore, and he sits at a vantage point where not a lot of other people can. I'm sure he's been in rooms where all kinds of conversations around AI in schools have happened. He also teaches at an institution which is at the frontier of teaching about AI and building about AI. And I'm hoping he's going to be able to use all the hats he wears to give us a very balanced view of this conversation. Um, my second panelist for the evening is Meenal Majumdar. She's the founder and CEO of the Innovation Story, an organization with the mission to bring STEM, robotics, and AI education to 1 million Indian students by 2030. Her work spans all kinds of schools in India, from private to government, and she has partnerships with various Indian institutions like IIT Delhi, IIT Bombay, ISC Bangalore, and corporates like Amazon. Meenal led a team of Indian students to win the World Championship at the first Robotics Challenge in 2025, which was big coming out of India. and will talk to us about what it means to actually uh, build digitally empowered learners at scale across the varied Indian school landscape. Thank you so much for making the time, Professor Raman and Neerav, and look forward to having a great conversation with you. Okay, we're going to start. J3 also does some primary research, and last year we launched this report called the Student Sync Index. Somebody from the team can just put a download link to that report. But uh, a huge majority of students, even as of 2025, were using AI in their academic work. In a recent survey, 85% of class 9 to 12 students have been found to be using AI at work. Teachers in schools are feeling pressured to use a technology they've not been properly trained on. And there's almost a sense that the technology has overtaken policy in a way, and people are feeling left behind. So, this is my question for both of you. For teachers and principals, what should be their first response be in today's time? And how should they think about AI?
Yeah, so maybe I'll go first. So one of the things that is really urgent is that students need to understand what is it that they are using, right? It just seems like a black box. It's very confident. It's arrogant at times. It sounds very polished, right? So you think that it is some sort of a fantastic resource that helps you finish your homework without doing much. Right. So this is like a big challenge, right? So the most important thing, if you ask me, is to sort of teach students about how AI can fail, right? So to not trust AI, right? I'm not saying this. I'm not on the negative side of things as far as AI is concerned, obviously, but I want students to whenever I talk about students, right, I want them to really get their critical thinking hat on. I don't want them to just say, okay, chat gpt sir has said this and let's move on, right? I think that's quite a big problem for me. So the thing I would say is develop AI literacy, teach students what AI is all about and how it works, what are the risks, what are the fantastic benefits, and most importantly, what are the dangers of overusing AI? Not just in the context of getting wrong inputs, getting biased results, or anything, but in terms of your own cognitive development. I think this is a conversation that a friend of mine wrote a beautiful article some time ago. He clearly argued how using AI is not akin to using a calculator, right? When you use a calculator, you're offloading a mechanical task in some sense, right? And when you offload thinking to AI, it's okay for experts because they've already developed those muscles and they are using it to become more productive. But when a developing child does that, they are sacrificing that muscle development.
Cognitive offloading has become a very hot term these days. Meenal, over
So
to you.
it's gone all the way until cognitive surrender.
Yeah. Yes. Meenal, please.
So absolutely to add on to what Professor Karthik said that you can't outsource your thinking, and that's the danger here, essentially. And how do you go about building a foundation, understanding what AI is in terms of building AI literacy, ethics, so important. How do you kind of bias and ethics? How do you get that right? And get a great technical understanding. So the whole idea here is to not be a consumer or to be used by, like, there are three levels of AI: below AI, at AI, and above AI. And how do you move to above AI, where you can you can create and not just stop at consuming AI? And that is a whole amazing game when once you get it, because then, like, you are the creator and you have that power to generate. And once children know the joy of creating, there is no end. The whole hands-on experience can be a complete game changer if it's portrayed the right way, and if it's like the right tools are given, the right foundation for education is set in place. So yeah, so for schools it's so important to understand the difference between AI consumption and AI creation, and that I think would be the biggest important thing.
My next question again is to both of you. In a race to be AI ready, do you feel schools get confused in teaching about AI and teaching with AI, especially for students as well as for teachers? Students, like Professor Raman said, need to understand what it is, how it works, etc. And then there's this whole thing of use AI to learn. Do you find schools getting confused, uh, or do they need to think about it differently?
I think yes, because so at times I've seen schools think that learning how to use ChatGPT or prompt using ChatGPT is what is AI, and that's just so common, right? And that's something, and that's where the distinction is. When you learn about AI, you're basically learning about literacy, about how do I go and build my own ChatGPT or my own thing. Whereas learning with AI, if you if you've done the learn about AI, then learning with AI becomes about amplifying your thinking or about kind of ensuring that you are in the problem solving and creative mode and not outsource thinking where you do not know what else. If it fails, as Professor Karthik said, then what? Then you're just stuck, and that is something which is a dangerous place to be.
Yeah, so there is a sort of challenge here, right? So one thing is very clear, we all agree upon that. Using AI tools doesn't mean anything, right? It doesn't measure competence. It doesn't. It's not much, but and it is something that people should never conflate with knowing or understanding AI. Right? It's clearly not the case. But then the other side of things is the real challenge, which is this is happening, right? Let's not talk about whether it's happening in schools or not. In government schools or like in schools where there isn't much, you don't have too much tech inside the classroom, right? You have a variety of schools, right? Even from affordable private schools to government schools, you have schools which don't have tech in the classroom. It doesn't mean that it's not happening. There was a wonderful article written by Sutit Dey from ISER Pune just a couple of days back in Indian Express, where he talks about AI should not be used at 9 p.m. at home when an assignment is half done. And fixing that is the first thing that we need to do. I don't think we could have said it better than that, right? So the challenge is AI is being used outside of school, right? And I don't even think this is not a school problem to solve in some sense, right? Because schools can unless I have a higher education problem to solve there, right? Because my students have laptops all the time, they do their assignments all the time, they have their laptops open in class. I don't know at what point they are jumping into chat gpt to solve something. So this is a challenge that's probably more rampant in, like, say, higher education and so on. But in terms of schools, I would think this is a problem in homes and not in schools.
Okay. A couple of themes that you've brought up, we'll talk about. One is the shadow AI use, students using it on the sly, almost thinking, because they are not clear yet, oh, does this amount to cheating or not? And then we'll come to that also. Professor Raman, you chaired the committee for CBSE, and CBSE has gone the curriculum route, at least as a first step, to engage with AI and computational thinking. School boards like IB and others in Cambridge have issued explicit guidance on what students can use and cannot use AI for. So, as the committee was debating this, what was the directional intent? And does the curriculum that CBSE has developed, does it answer this question for students and for parents that, hey, should I be using AI to solve this assignment? Or, hey, should my kid be using AI to solve this assignment and learn about the technology?
Yeah, so the first challenge is that a part of the students for whom this curriculum is designed are not allowed to use AI, right? So if you go today and sign up on ChatGPT, you have to say that you're over 13 years old. Let's not talk about what people do, but you have this 13-year, 14-year cutoff for the use of ChatGPT, or like any LLM for that matter. And we are starting the curriculum at class 3, where the kids are going to be like 9, 10-ish, 9-ish. So this is the first thing to worry about. And the other challenge is that if we came up with some rules today, right? I'm not sure if those rules will survive 3 months. Right? Because the space is evolving faster than anything that we've seen. right?
Right.
For instance, hallucination is less of a problem today than it was. I don't know. I worry. I chose my word right. I worry if we won't be talking about hallucination 1 year down the line,
Mm.
right? So this is a challenge, right? Because on the one hand, I want students to be skeptical about AI output and to be questioning, right? That is critical. Anyway, the point is, I think it is not feasible to come up with a meaningful set of rules. Right? Of course, I think I'm sure schools will have their own rules about what copying is. And in fact, I worry, right, because we all keep complaining about rampant copy pasting from the internet.
Right.
How is copy pasting from the internet different from copy pasting from ChatGPT? Right? So this is a challenge that I think schools may have tackled, and some schools may have tackled, many schools haven't. But I don't know if like a board should be prescriptive about this. This is, the school has to ingrain this value system. Right? And when you're focused on curriculum, and of course, there is a lot of focus on summative assessments and things like that. And at that time, maybe it makes sense to start talking about these things. Probably a good thing to think about. But the curriculum way is quite important because hopefully the students are sown with the seed of understanding what AI is, understanding the ethical aspects of AI, because ethical aspects are woven into the curriculum right from day one. It's not like chapter 10, right? So it's there all through, and I think that's going to be quite helpful. And the other thing is also there are people who keep saying that AI could be like a passing software fad and all of that, right?
Right.
And let's park that aside for a moment. But what's more important is that computational thinking is always going to be important. And it is a way of approaching problems. It is a way of problem solving. In fact,
Mm.
I feel that AI has become very good because of how it does computational thinking, and so to speak, right? Because if you look at some of these new models like GPT 5.5 or Claude 4.7, the way they've been breaking down problems is what has probably empowered them to solve seemingly different, difficult and creative questions. Like there are mathematicians who've been saying that this is PhD level stuff that this LLM has cooked up in a couple of hours with very simple prompts, right? And
Right.
that is because of how it's been disassembling the problem in various ways. So
Right.
anyway, my main thing that I'm positing here is that computational thinking is the background for AI. It's the foundation on which to build AI, and it's not going to get dated. So it makes sense for a school curriculum.
Got it. But Professor Raman, like you said, there is copy pasting from the internet, and there is copy pasting from LLMs. I think parents and teachers will argue with you saying that when the internet was there, at least students would have to read what they're copy pasting. The big challenge that they find with LLMs and AI is that it just serves it up to the student on a platter. It makes it so easy, even to even yeah, and so polished that the friction is completely removed, and
Yeah.
that of course has its impact on the development of the child, as you spoke about.
So this is where I think we can really get we can differentiate between like an eighth grader and like say a 12th grader, right? I don't think an eighth grader should go anywhere near AI for writing an essay. But a 12th grader could actually put that essay into ChatGPT and ask it to rewrite it and improve it, and see what changes happened, and use that to improve her or his thinking, right? So this could be a definite legitimate use of an LLM for learning. But I'm really not sure whether I would encourage it in class 8, right? I'm sure. Yeah, I would love to hear what my English teacher has to say about it.
Meenal, do you agree? Would you say that an eighth grader should not be near an LLM?
I would definitely agree in terms of not using it to kind of, you improve their writing, because at that stage they still need to be confident about their own writing to go to the next level where they can, add value to it through through LLMs. So I completely agree with Professor Karthik here, where, it is more about building your own skills and learning because that's also going to be equally important, right? Ultimately, AI is not going to be there all the time, and you will have to have your own skills, your own judgment, your own emotional quotient to be able to handle things. So yeah.
Thank you. My next question is to you, Meenal. Given the variety of schools you work with, the different kinds of infrastructure readiness, teacher readiness, can you walk our audience through what are the different approaches you're seeing on the ground, from progressive to maybe some not so progressive approaches?
Yeah, I mean, to start off, let me say that everybody's still discovering what needs to be done. And as Professor Karthik said, things are changing so fast that even to be up to date is a task, but where to begin is a question. And also how much AI is really required. Teachers actually have AI free zones or AI free periods where they want to focus just on things which are completely you could talk about AI but use case studies or videos or debates to talk about ethics or biases. So that's one part where and moving from there to having AI maker spaces, where we have developed maker spaces for schools where we have AI labs where students actually work on developing their own chatbots, their where like computer vision comes into play, things like that. To basically also doing project-based learning using AI. So there are various models that schools are still figuring out and actually trying to see which works and how much is required. So essentially, it's more about like asking, how much do I really require? Like exactly how much of the timetable do we really want AI to drive is the question that schools are still trying to figure out. And where do you, where do you insist on human-led learning
Mm.
basically, and how much should that be? So I think right now people are still trying to figure where the balance is. But clearly, I mean, there are various degrees, and schools are cognizant of the fact that AI is no longer a supplemental thing, and how can it be integrated to make it like an English or a coding which is compulsory.
And where do you think there is a directional balance or equilibrium in the short term?
Definitely, AI literacy is important. So learning about AI to understand how to what it is not an option anymore. So definitely having AI assisted learning, having AI as a thing to learn first is important, and then moving from there to project-based learning. So I think it's actually, as I said, it's like English, right? Like where do you see a balance? It's there everywhere. It's all pervasive, and that's where AI is going to be. So we might as well
Right.
learn how to embrace it in that sense.
Right. My next question is for both of you. We've had a rich conversation about students and the use of AI. There's also a parallel conversation in which teachers and their use of AI. Now, there have been many purported benefits of AI for teachers, planning lessons, designing rubrics, um, some controversy about using AI for assessments. So, what can AI reliably do for teachers and help them free up some time or help them step up as teachers based on your experience?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting question, right? And there are some challenges here. So A, the teacher wants to get productive, and B, the teacher could use this to scale, which is a very legitimate use. But if a teacher just, for example, pastes the student homework into AI, gets the comments, and gives it back to the student, well, the parent could have done it or the student could have done it, right? And this doesn't help. So where AI can help in assessment is perhaps in possibly getting some inputs about a particular student, right? What is the student struggling with, or what is this class struggling with? So those high level things may be useful, and in fact, an LLM could infer that very nicely, assuming you have the ability to present data to that. So well, I have used AI in the classroom, right? I have used it to, for example, generate walkthroughs of some algorithms and things like that. It's wonderful in making these animations. Some things that I couldn't have really coded up myself, and so on. Or preparing some worksheets for students, right? Which are, I mean, of course, if they are going to be important for assessment, I would have to pay more attention to it. But there are some self-assessment worksheets that the students all the time want, and it's just easy to make these worksheets very quickly using one of these LLMs. So that it's helpful. And but it's very, I think this is like a careful line to tread. So yeah, love to hear what Meenal has to say about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, it's used for obviously admin for to free up her time in terms of whatever. It's also useful to kind of see a pattern, right? Like where what are the, like if the class is being taught math, then what are the weak areas and is there a pattern in what is happening? So that's one thing. But to use it directly to come to a conclusion and not use your own judgment to kind of know that, oh, this is because this, so that whole human connection that the teacher brings in, right? That is something which where obviously will still always matter no matter how much AI you use. So while it'll free them time, I think it's a long way before we can use AI indiscriminately, and that's where I think is a difference. So the drawing the line is where is when you cannot just use it rampantly to say that this is conclusive. It's basically you'll have to use your human judgment. You'll have to have again, the ethics part becomes important. And also, again, coming to, like, suppose a student is struggling with writing, for example, then again, it's a judgment of the teacher to know whether if your struggle is because, I mean, how much AI to put in, because if you want to develop the child, her or him on the writing part, then it's important to know where the AI should come in and where the child has to still let him be to kind of decide for himself and learn for himself. So yeah, AI
Right.
can learn
You,
for you, and that's where the teacher has to discriminate, basically.
pre-AI, you've mentioned this word judgment a few times, right? Pre-AI, teachers were expected to apply judgment to each child's individual personal learning needs and journey, etc. It almost seems like they also need to have judgment about the use of AI in what context. You mentioned some use cases, but equally, many teachers feel that their schools or leadership are forcing them to, use AI everywhere indiscriminately. So, how does a teacher develop this judgment or develop this vocabulary to push back even on areas where they think, schools may be overreaching about the use of AI? You talked about AI literacy for students. Do we need this kind of AI literacy programs for teachers as well?
Absolutely. That's when the student literacy will come in. So initially, actually, it has to be at the teacher literacy important, and again within her own school time, because they don't have extra time for, because they're so overwhelmed with work, right? So how do you inculcate that over even before going to student? I think the face has to be the teacher, where first free up their time with from admin and monotonous tasks to understand how can they use AI literacy, and what are the, so I think every school needs to have its own framework, in terms of what is it that should be done and what shouldn't be done. And this framework again will keep evolving because of so many things. I mean, as simple as using Chat GPT because you're not 13, as Professor Karthik said, how do you then, and but kids are using it. So how do you, like there's so many things where the question of right and wrong will keep coming in. And that's where developing judgment becomes so critical. And again, there's no right or wrong answer. Just that you learn, you have a framework and you follow that framework, I think is what it is. And everybody will have to develop it as they move along.
Great. Thank you, Meenal. Professor Ram.
Just a quick add to that, I think she covered it perfectly, but I would just say that anything that helps the teacher become more productive is fine, right? But where, again, the teacher shouldn't outsource that thinking or judgment of a child to the AI, right? So I think the teachers will get this naturally, right?
So
They
there's
will know when
cognitive
it is
offloading for teachers as well.
absolutely, of course.
Absolutely.
Great. Professor Raman, next question for you. The CBSE, at least from what we've read, has taken a very almost offline approach to learning about AI. They're focused on this philosophy of TWA, the world around us, right? At what point do you think it's appropriate to introduce children to the tools themselves so that they can develop functional fluency? It's almost I know you've talked about computational thinking as a way of thinking about AI, but how do what's the right balance? I think the CBSE has taken a lower floor of class 3 that okay, this is when we need to start talking to children about AI. But when do they start developing functional fluencies? In models across the world, some student like China, for example, they will work with tools throughout. I read the news that the UA has also introduced AI for K-12, kindergarten onwards. So what do you say to that?
Yeah, I think a lot of the same arguments keep applying again and again, right? In terms of cognitive offloading, the ability to ability to verify output or develop the muscle and so on. But from a CBSE perspective, or from a just a school perspective, we still live in a country where about 46% of the schools don't have access to the internet, right? This may not be so for CBSE schools, but there are still a lot of schools which, and I think one of the participants has rightly raised that question on chat as well, right? So this curriculum therefore is definitely more unplugged. It's by design unplugged, and but it's possible to start doing this later on. And I would still say this has to come at definitely not in primary school. It could be, I would say, at least they have to be 13, of course, right? And maybe, that's a reasonable time, right? Because that's going to become the norm. I don't know how these things are going to evolve. Are we going to have special parental permission to do this and so on? But there are like pluses as well, right? For instance, I'm not too sure if I wouldn't like my child using something like Carmigo
Hmm.
because it never gives you the answer, right? It keeps prompting you in a Socratic fashion to make you think about this. So this is the thing, and I think Priyanka has a good point. I've always been talking about this to folks as to not about CBSE launching it, but is it a meaningful commercial venture to have like an LLM with serious guardrails, right? That parents and teachers are happy to sign off on it for student use. And looks like it's just not cost effective for these people, right? So it's not something that folks are trying to introduce, but Kanmigo does exist, and I think that's probably a model to think about. And in fact, this is where I think the tool building innovation has to come in, right? So if teachers had access to how students are using ChatGPT,
Hmm.
right? So I don't know what are the ethical and other implications that we need to worry about this at some point of time. But if this is like, a school run app and the students are learning, like, let's say some mathematical concepts using ChatGPT or Carmigo, and I believe this is possible in Carmigo already today, um, is it would help me teach differently in class, right? I know what is it that the students are predominantly struggling with. So this feedback loop is, I think, very critical. And this is something that we've actually been focused on. We have this Section 8 company now called IITM Bodhana AI Foundation. It's set up by the Ministry of Education to tackle foundational literacy and numeracy. And again, we have a few challenges on tech and so tech in the class and so on that. But the point is, can we give meaningful feedback to the students? Are we able to analyze what is it that the students are missing out on? Right? So this is to me the biggest challenge. So and hopefully and I think it's also very difficult to mandate the use of certain tools and things like that, right? Because the tools get outdated and we may print textbooks every year or two, and tools probably change in like 3 months, right? I know a lot of us surely weren't using Claude as much a few months back than we are using it today, right? Or
Right.
it just keeps the landscape keeps changing, and this is not something that's easy. And it's also important to have many open source and cheap tools and SLMs, offline LLMs that people can use and things like that. So there are some interesting research and technical challenges here as well.
I'm glad that you brought up the example of Khanmigo because in the last 3 months, Khan Academy's own tune on Khanmigo's kind of changed. I think they're going to sunset that product. They also found that the usage of the product was not that great, that Students don't naturally reach out to the chatbot despite multiple product design nudges. And ChatGPT is also has a education product. I think what they found was that if you try enforcing Rails on a product like this, students just end up going to the commercial version and they bypass the whole purpose of that product altogether. So is that going to be, is that a workable solution? Because Khan Academy has very wide distribution, multiple kind of student types and bases across the world, and they have ultimately the new sort of thinking is that human systems actually are the way to build forward, and not the AI chatbots. Meenal, do you have a comment on that? And I'll come to Professor Raman.
Actually, I fully agree, because at the age that we're talking about, right, it really, that whole human connection has, I mean, AI just can't replace that. As a parent, I want the child to have the emotional quotient, the emotional intelligence that comes out of human connection. So yeah, I completely am with, I'm just seeing where this is headed, actually, honestly. I was also quite surprised, not surprised, but happy to see that, but also surprised to see that something coming from Khan Academy met with what happened, basically.
Right. Professor Raman, did you have a comment? Because Meenal touched on something which was a question for later, but I think right now is the right time to ask it.
In terms of?
No, on the Khanmigo thing, did you have a comment? And then I'll come to Meenal.
No. I'm actually surprised because my understanding is that there is a lot. I didn't realize that there were these challenges, because we actually had a webinar just last Saturday with Swati Vasudevan, who heads Carmigo India, and they were talking about how it's been used in different ways and things like that. So I'm actually not sure on what are the other challenges that. And I think there is a lot of maybe the schools have to engage a little better. Schools and parents will have to engage in this. The enforcement has to come at home, right? Because as I said earlier, and that very nice article by Sutir, I think home use definitely overpowers school use, right? And so the
Right.
habits have to be taught at home, and this is definitely an important messaging to carry on.
Right.
Right? And so parents should encourage children to use Carmigo rather than ChatGPT, for instance, right? Or the ChatGPT learn mode. It does have that as well, right? So, and that should
Yes.
be the
Yes.
default for. I believe that, but as you said, right? So people will switch over to DeepSeek or something else that's or like a jailbroken version of one of these tools that doesn't
Yeah.
have these guardrails. So these are fundamental challenges that need to be tackled.
Meenal, we started talking about parents, right? And I think they were one stakeholder that we were going to talk about. Now, parents are also under a lot of influence. They are reading about AI every day. They are reading about Alpha School in the US, where AI is teaching, all courses, and students are only going to school for 2 hours a day. In their workplaces, they are seeing the impact of AI. They are seeing roles getting automated, layoffs happening. All of this is happening in the real world, right? And they are concerned that my child should be ready for the world that is coming. Equally, they're also concerned about screen time. They're also concerned about, hey, my social, emotional learning of my child should not get compromised. They are definitely, most parents are struggling with, over reliance or over exposure to tech. So, how do parents resolve this? What is a good line for parents to tread?
It's a tough time to be a parent. That's all I can say.
Is there ever an easy time to be a parent?
No, but honestly, you said that, right? Like when COVID came, when schools went online, suddenly parents had to give WhatsApp to every child, for example. A lot of,
Mm.
and they were not happy because obviously, screen time, also the quality of or the depth of learning was a question, and that continue. Those concerns have only increased over a period of time because of, I mean, screen time, about on being online, not enough safety there, guardrails not in place. So it is a difficult thing. And again, it's in all of this, I think they also want to depend on schools, because schools ultimately seem to have solutions, or other, as parents, it's easy to quote unquote outsource that kind of decision making, because I have to just follow whatever the school says, right? And hence I think schools become even more important in terms of what policies they look at. But as parents, when I speak with most parents, they don't want they want to reduce the screen time for sure. And we do
Right.
robotics as well, so I see that a lot of our robotics enrollments improve, because to get away from AI, but to do more hands-on, more kind of
Hands-on.
things. Yeah, so I know for a fact that parents are wary about it, and they would uh, rather when the kids are younger, especially like the grades 1 to 7, 8, do more hands-on stuff.
Right. Professor Raman, you talked about the rate of change of AI and textbooks becoming stale. And now, how has CBSE thought about future proofing this new curriculum that's just come out? We know how long it takes to affect schools in a system, change in a system which has so many thousands of schools.
So I think just being practical here, right? It'll take a while to percolate, but I think this is just my outsider view, right? I don't have an insider view on this, right? Because I haven't been inside the
In
system
the,
for
the
long enough,
system.
right? I'm in higher education, but what I feel is that eventually this will start making a solid difference, and I think there are some. I think a lot of people should just parents should just pick up the computational thinking book and read through it. Right? It's fun. It's the same puzzles your children have been solving after school. That's now being
Mm,
solved in school.
right.
Okay, so I think children love puzzle solving, and I think for some reason we don't let them do enough of it in schools. No, we
Mm,
burden them with all kinds of write a long answer on some whatever, right? So I think I'm sure computational thinking is going to be met with a lot of positivity. I'm sure some students will struggle, right, because they haven't developed those muscles. Just like people don't to develop arithmetic muscles and so on, right? There is always going to be a bell curve, no doubt about it. But I think they're going to enjoy trying to think about these things, right? And it's very, visual, right? How does this object look from that side? Right?
mm,
These are all things. I mean, I think we do a lot of it in engineering drawing, but I don't think, I'm sure a third class student is as good at doing that one start, right? So these are some of the things where I think it's really interesting to, this is definitely going to be something. And in terms of obsolescence, I don't think the curriculum is going to be obsolete at all, because this is just as foundational as math and things like that.
mm,
I'm sure the applications, and I'm sure 20% of the curriculum will have to be continually revised, right? Because you want to not talk about this one magic use of AI that's come in the
mm,
last 6 months, right? But other than that, if you look at computational thinking, I don't think it's going to change. Class 3, class 4, class 5, I don't see anything changing for the most part, right? Of course, except then other than what we will revise based on meaningful feedback on the ground, right? So
right.
what teachers enjoy, what teachers think is hard to implement in a class, or what is confusing, or things like that, right? So I'm sure that kind of feedback will help improve it. But in terms of just the technology moving forward rapidly, I don't think it's good. Supervised learning is going to remain supervised learning. Unsupervised learning is going to remain the same. We may add something else, right? So on top of RL, we may give a new example where RL has changed drug discovery, for example, if that happens in the next
Right.
3 years. But I think it's the curriculum seems to be fairly future proof in that sense.
Right. Thank you, Professor. Meena, next one to you. There are, schools are running their pilots. They are trying all kinds of tools. What they decide today about what students should learn or what tools they should use is going to decide what students become fluent on. But right now, it almost seems that it's a very haphazard thing, right? A technology vendor, we talked about Khanmigo, somebody will come offer Khanmigo for free to a school, they will start experimenting with it. Similar things are probably happening with chatbots from other providers like Google or ChatGPT. But from a school administrator point of view, when a school is evaluating a tool, for institution-wide use, what are some of the things they need to be thinking about choosing? There is, of course, ChatGPT may have or LLMs may have a 13-year minimum requirement but there's also data, there's privacy, there is apart from students' usage and effect of that usage, there's actual personal identifiable information flowing into these systems. Right? So how should schools think about this?
So again, having the framework becomes critical, right? Like every school needs to have that. So there are multiple levels of looking at this. One is, of course, from a vendor perspective, how much data and what are the kind of arrangements you have with the vendor where data is not something that they use. But again, limited implementation is how I would look at it. But also educating the teachers and students about what is happening, because a lot of times they also do not know that how their data is being used. So what do you share? And getting everybody on the same page on that is very critical. The third is, of course, also safety in terms of what the child actually is getting into is also important. And no matter how much, like hallucinations is one thing, but also misuse of data or misuse of a violation of privacy are things that are very important and critical. So how do you at a vendor level, like what are the kind of safeguards that you have in place to kind of ensure that these things do not happen? So it is tricky. Of course, I mean, considering that the vendors are for schools, they would definitely want, they would be okay to kind of having those things in place, but schools will have to be extra vigilant about having these systems in place, because that is something which is very, very going to be important. But educating the teachers and the students also on this is something that is going to be critical.
Great. This is for both of you. We spoke about risk. There's now a larger conversation that comes around, AI has come, disrupted education, and people are talking about what is the purpose of education in the first place, right? And that's become a hot topic. For a school, in trying to become AI ready or AI forward, what is the risk that they overcorrect and forget all the foundational purpose of education, all the things we've been talking about as reading, writing, reasoning skills, and just overcorrect in the other direction, and then lose out on what the core experience of at least a school education is? We'll talk about higher ed in some time.
So I think some answers are easy, right? I think if you're looking at foundational literacy, numeracy, we have clear benchmarks, right? If you cannot beat those benchmarks, you can do AI, you can do any song and dance, it doesn't matter, right? You need, what is it, like 25% of 8th class children are not able to read 2nd class texts or something like that. Right. And I mean, there are like such stark numbers that really shake you up. Right. So this is like clear, right? And there are children who can't do borrowing by the 3rd class students who can't do borrowing by subtraction and things like that. So basic arithmetic, so I think we need clear benchmarks for evaluation. Right, what actually counts, and this is something that we probably did talk about enough during assessment, and the national education policy and of course the current CBSE curriculum clearly focuses on not just simple exams and things like that, right? So you start thinking about projects, activities, formative assessments, and so on, and not just and continuous assessment, not just worrying about a simple, usual school exams and things like that, right? It has to be competency based. Look at problem solving, look at the students' journals, debates on ethics of things and so on. There are so many of these things that have to be considered. So I think we need to establish the benchmarks, and definitely just jumping in and replacing stuff with AI just to make it fancy, because ultimately, but there are solid discussions to be had here, right? So in fact, I've been arguing with some friends on this, right? AI does make you more efficient, but at what cost? Right? Are you willing to have that cost? And I don't know if we know the answer yet, right? So some of us who are sort of on the skeptic side of things might think that are more worried about cognitive outsourcing and things like that, rather than I mean, so what? It's going to be a tool that you permanently have, right? Or it's going to be a tool
Right.
that's going to be improving. So why not become reliant on that? Right? Is it just another calculator? It clearly isn't, but I don't know if at some point we will start viewing it as another calculator or a computer or something like that. But this is like, but which is why I think we need very clear benchmarks, right? So what counts as in terms of literacy and numeracy, the answer is clear. But in,
Yes.
if you want us to, what makes a good law student, what makes a good commerce student, what makes a good math or bio student, right? I think we need to, are they able to think critically, right?
Right.
Without AI, right? So, and there are other things that we need to worry about, right? In terms of the environmental cost of AI and all of those things. We rarely speak about these things. And it's important that students also understand the cost of these things, right? But what if AI becomes extremely expensive tomorrow, for some
Yeah.
reason? Right, we've all seen so many other things fluctuate in prices because of wars and other things, and of course, I think we're very glad that we are building sovereign AI models and things like that. So we have some sort of backup, but there are so many other questions that we still need to debate.
Meena?
I completely agree over here. I mean, absolutely on the point that it is, especially for the younger group, like, improving efficiency at what cost is the question that needs to be answered. Like, and does it need to be done at the age that they are in, like, grades 1 to 8 for sure. I mean, AI is always going to be there, so your efficiency will improve. But once after you've built your own fundamental thinking and your own fundamental way of reasoning, which is critical reasoning, which is so important. I mean, there is time and place for everything, and that can happen. I think initially the human knowledge, the human wisdom development is critical. So yeah, I would go with exactly what Professor Karthik said.
So if I have to summarize both of your viewpoints, very cautious actual tool usage in use, very cautious in age appropriate exposure to AI is the way to go. And schools need frameworks to make some of these decisions as they go along in this journey. Is that broadly okay? Would you like to add anything to
And
this?
I would just like to add one thing, right? So there is this Wharton study where they looked at 1,000 high schoolers, and students with unrestricted AI scored 48% better with the tool. Great. But 17% worse than peers without it when the tool was withdrawn. Right?
Right.
So it should not become a crutch. Simple, right? So I don't know but I don't know what numbers I'll be happy with, right? So if that 48-17 becomes, 48-5, would we be happy? I'm not sure, right? It may be okay, right? But if it is 25, I wouldn't even agree, right? So there has to be like a good payoff for using the tool, and not a significant loss, right? So cut your losses, and that should be a significant advantage for using the tool.
That's a great way of looking at it. While I ask Professor Raman the last question, I will also request the audience to put in questions in the chat if they have. Professor Raman has very kindly answered many of them over chat already. But if you have any other questions from the audience, please feel free to put it in the chat. Professor Raman, the students that are coming out of the system today are going to be in higher ed tomorrow. And they're going to come into higher ed a lot more AI fluent or, computationally thinking fluent than they are today. Do you think the disruption as higher ed in education will be bigger than in K-12? Because we are talking about a very cautious approach in schools, but by the time people are in higher ed, they are adults and, they should be able to have that judgment about how and when to use AI.
Absolutely. I mean, this is my favorite question, and I'm just going to tell you a simple answer. We need one more webinar, right? But the point is that the disruption is definitely going to be massive. I think we have to rethink so many things. For instance, the first thing I've been asking colleagues to rethink is, should we continue to teach programming the way that we do? In at least if you talk about a higher engineering education, everybody goes through an introductory programming course. Is that needed today? I would rather replace it with an introductory computational thinking course,
Mhm.
and And the rest of the course is about giving wrong programs generated via ChatGPT and ask students to spot the errors. Without access to a ChatGPT, of course, right? So this is going to be the way forward. And in fact, there are courses which have started doing this. There is a fantastic course by Professor Viraj at IASC. The course is fancily titled Programming Using Generative AI. Right, and it's an online course, that NPTEL course, where the videos are free, and if somebody wants to write an exam, they have to register. But you can already go and look at these videos and see how you can prompt AI to generate codes, but then how do you still develop the muscle to debug it and so on. So that is one line of things. And if you're talking about higher education and wanting to lay the foundation for, let's say, master's or PhD, I think you need to really understand how AI is affecting your field. And I don't think the current curricula do this. And this is something that we are really working on at IIT Madras. So one way, of course, is to have a dedicated AI major, right? And that's definitely one way. But how do you touch all the fields? Right. So one argument that we've been having is that we need to inject AI into all the courses that we have. Right. Have a little bit, right? So you may teach a course on biochemistry, but just pair it up with 2 lectures on how AlphaFold has changed structure prediction for proteins and so on. And if you're teaching a course on literature, talk about how LLMs can be used to scan ancient manuscripts and to build some database out of it and make some interesting queries and whatever. I'm sure there's a touch point to every single course that somebody can imagine, and this has to be done thoughtfully. And what is more important is what we talked about schools, right? Because in schools we were talking about protecting students from AI. Here, that ship has sailed completely. Students are going to be using AI. You need an AI policy clearly saying what's acceptable and what's not. And this is something the IITs are trying to come up with, but I think we're already late. We should have done it earlier, but we are on it.
No, more and more news comes about higher ed and AI every day. I think just yesterday, Princeton has returned to proctored exams after 133 years. Zubair had a question. Is it possible that AI will write research papers in the future? Many research papers today that are going to journals do seem to be getting generated by AI. What about the future of PhDs and professors? Just teaching and training or something else?
Yeah, I think evaluating the cognitive muscle, right? That's definitely going to be the role of teachers for sure. And I don't think AI is definitely going to be able to do some kinds of research. But if it can match all of human creativity in all domains, I think that remains to be seen. But what is indeed impressive is that there are senior mathematicians and computer scientists who are lauding AI for its ability to solve problems, and to me that's like a wonderful thing. And there is also a lot of room for collaboration with AI, right? And I have colleagues who talk about this notion of co-intelligence, where it's you use AI to make yourself a much more smarter human being. And I think that is going to be one of the real uses of AI, right? Where we saw that 48% number a little while ago, right? So can it make you really better than your baseline, way better than your baseline, right? Without much of a cost when it is taken off? That to me again is the answer.
Thank you so much, Professor Raman, and we will take you up on that other webinar also. Meenal, any closing comments, your last message to school leaders and parents still engaging, wrestling with the question of where does AI belong in a school and how do we design the optimal K-12 experience around K? I think we should forget K in the K-12. One thing we have agreed in the webinar is that it's not a K-12 discussion.
Absolutely. So it's about embracing AI because it's there to stay, but doing it responsibly, which is important. And also, how are we not passive users, and how do students convert into active creators, and what needs to be like, what is AI and how do I create LLMs? How do I, like, that should be the journey we should kind of focus on. And yeah, that's what it is.
All right. Thank you so much. We are almost at time, and there are no other open questions. There was one comment from Priyanka around, controlled study on LLM's impact. Stanford does have a paper that just came out around all the evidence that exists in K-12 till date, about 800 studies. And the net of that study is that right now there's not a lot of causal data in AI use in K-12 and improved outcomes. More research is required. Many areas are still underexplored, but this is what exists today on that matter. Thank you so much for everyone who's joined the webinar, and thank you so much to our panelists that have made this a very dense, power-packed, energetic conversation. We look forward to having you again. Join us on more conversations about AI in education. It's not going anywhere. 3 months later, some other breakthrough may be here, and we will be talking about it again. Yes, the recording will be shared with all participants later. Thank you so much. Have a good evening, and we will see you at the next edition of J3 Dialogues. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you, Meenal. Thank you, Professor.
Bye.